I can't believe it took me as long as it did to check out actor HaydenChristensen's filmography after seeing Little Italy when it came out, and I'll have a video out about that film soon. Although, I will say that it was the Star Wars prequels that made me dig that rabbit hole deeper, finding his best work in Shattered Glass and Life as a House. Needless to say, I needed to know what else was out there. As I worked my way through recommendations made by Reddit users, I came across a thread about the television drama HigherGround, which, let's be honest, I don't think would have gotten any attention had it not been for the connection made with Obi-Wan's "I have the high ground" line in Revenge of the Sith. In any case, I'm grateful for it, because I got to watch a series that's still relevant to teens and adults over 20 years after its release. HigherGround follows Peter Scarborough, the principal of Mount Horizon High School, where he and assistant director Sophie Becker guide troubled youth on the road to recovery after various traumatic experiences in their lives. The show focuses primarily on 7 students in a semi-anthological format. Scott Barringer, played by Christensen, a talented athlete and musician who turned to drugs as a result of repeated abuse by his stepmother. Shelby Merrick, who also took drugs and attempted to live off of the trade due to negligence by her mother and abuse by her stepfather. Catherine Cabot, a promising scholar and athlete who became unsure of her place in the world as an adopted child, with the death of her parents' biological daughter emotionally destroying her. Augusto Ciceros, a dyslexic artist who is caught drawing graffiti and constantly doubts his own intellect. Juliette Wayborn, a bulimic and self-harming model caused by her mother's emotionally distant narcissism. Ezra Friedkin, another adopted child whose existence merely served to try and save a broken marriage, and his unsuccessful efforts to appease his parents led him to abuse drugs. And Daisy Lipanovsky, whose parents were alcoholics and her father's violent behavior forced her to retaliate. There are so many themes that render the show ahead of its time, considering that they're still being grappled with to this day. Scott's storyline proves that, like women, men can also be victims of abuse and other destructive behaviors. Having lived through difficult times, the teenagers are fairly wise and resourceful beyond their years. The adults aren't always perfect role models. They each have their own pathos, their breaking point, and they have to learn to trust the support of their students to grow themselves. None of them can avoid their pain forever. They know, and they will never find peace until they confront it for what it is. The relationships among the cast are characterized by blunt, tough love intended to build each other up, not tear each other down. But the writing nevertheless doesn't apologize for its brutal honesty in showing how these characters feel and truly care. They don't always get along, where they can get frustrating and remind one another too much of themselves, but they ultimately can't live without each other because of the genuine bonds they share for their struggles and ever-changing outlooks on life. Even if the plot is episodic, characters don't suddenly get wrapped up with a pretty little bow as far as their arcs are concerned. Much like in the real world, trauma takes a consistent effort to overcome, and we'll see characters coping from, or adapting to, similar situations differently from time to time. But that doesn't mean they don't enjoy moments of fun together when they can. While I grew attached to all the characters, my favorites are Peter and Daisy. Peter is usually patient and approachable in his methods, but he doesn't always have the best judgment, and tries so hard to mask his own hardships for the sake of his students, when really, they'd benefit from having that mirror to reach out to. Daisy, in all her morbid cynicism, is unfailingly loyal in her friendships, particularly with Shelby. Some of the best dialogue in the show comes from their interactions. It doesn't sound especially kind, but the heart is there underneath. Despite its well-deserved praise, HigherGround does nonetheless have its flaws. The sound mixing is atrocious. Anytime music plays, you can barely hear the actors. I would have liked to see more Indigenous representation than what we got, and we definitely needed diversity in general, since really there's only two main characters of color, Catherine and Augusto, while Juliet's actress is Ashkenazi Jewish, but the character is coded as a white American. I also think that perhaps a little too much screen time was dedicated to the Scott, Shelby, Juliet love triangle, and not enough to exploring the other relationships that were developed. This is more of an ensemble cast, and so each story beat needs to be as much at the forefront as possible. It's especially true when some of the backstories tend to share similarities, and so there could have been opportunities to provide variation in where the events lead and how they are dealt with, since not everyone who's at risk in reality abuses substances or experiences parental neglect. For these reasons, the show was in dire need of a second season, which it never got when its broadcasting network got replaced. But I'm holding out hope for the day HigherGround gets some sort of follow-up with the original cast reunited, so that we could discover what their lives were like after Mount Horizon. I must make this clear. Mental health issues and learning disabilities, among other things, are not personality traits. HigherGround is one of the very few pieces of storytelling that serves as an excellent example of writers portraying troubled characters as actual people. Those things are a part of their lives, but they learn to deal with them while living like regular people with regular interests. There's even a whole journalism episode dedicated to this, debunking myths about rehabilitative schools. Everyone in the show learns to work together and trust one another, even if they aren't always kind to one another. This is true, but they also have a sense of humor, hopes and dreams, talents, feelings, a sense of camaraderie and understanding, and they navigate lifestyles and perspectives that are different from theirs, like when Scott and Augusto come to understand why normalizing different orientations is important, even if they don't personally orientate themselves differently. They aren't overly sensitive and isolated people that can't deal with what someone says to them or make their entire lives about their problems, at least not for long, thereby becoming antagonists in their own stories. I seriously recommend my viewers to check this show out if possible.